Coming up on Theatre Talk.
I've never wanted to fall off the lowest rung of any ladder I ever sort of start to climb, and I think, why not? I'm here to take risks. Nothing of value is without risk, and I'm only risking my reputation.
That's right.
Theatre Talk is made possible in part by the CUNY TV Foundation. From New York City, this is Theatre Talk. I'm Susan Haskins.
And I'm Michael Riedel of the New York Post.
So, Michael, I have seen not once but twice a wonderful musical, The Last Ship.
Yes, you saw it when they were trying out in Chicago this past summer. You called me from Chicago raving about this new musical on Broadway.
Yes.
That is now in previews, about to open, and I think to give some life into not the most exciting theater season so far, I must say.
Well, I'm not going to say for musicals.
Yeah.
Well,
we haven't had a great musical yet.
True, not yet.
That's why the pressure's on you guys to deliver one with The Last Ship about to open on Broadway. It has a book by the very talented John Logan, who wrote one of our favorite plays, Red, which won the Tony Award a few years ago. Welcome to Theatre Talk. And starring a very fine young actor, Michael Esper, whom I admired in The Lions, and also that Edward Albee play, Me, Myself, and I. I think you were in that years ago.
Yes, I was.
Very fine play. And the music and lyrics are by a newcomer to Broadway, making his Broadway debut, Mr. Sting. Welcome to Theatre Talk, and welcome to Broadway.
Thank you.
All right, so Sting, have you been a musical theater fan all your life? Has this been the dream?
I have, but I never saw a show.
Why?
I lived in the north of England. We never got the chance to see musicals or any shows of any kind.
Did you see
But my
Pantos?
mother had all the albums, all of Rodgers and Hammerstein, Lerner and Lowe, West Side Story, and I ate them for breakfast. So I feel I've been steeped in the musical theater, although I'd never actually seen a show.
Interestingly enough, then, so you would listen to these great scores, but did you really know the plots of the musicals, or were you just kind of inventing it all in your head?
No, I had no idea what the plots were, but the music spoke to me in a way that was very, touched my core.
Now, John, how did you become involved in this show? Because if I'm not mistaken, this is somewhat of an autobiographical show set in the area of England where you grew up.
No, it was set in my hometown, but it's not about me.
No, but it's about a hometown, or your town, where people were shipbuilders.
Yeah.
But
And
it's about a guy
building
who
the last
gets
ship.
out. It's about a guy who gets out.
But that's the only biographical element in it, really, that I'm admitting to.
We're going to another.
So you've invented everything out of whole cloth, John?
No. It's, I got involved about 2.5 years ago when Joe Mantello, the director, an old friend of mine, we were working together, and he came to me and said, would you be interested in working on the book to a musical? And, that's something I've wanted to do my whole life, because I'm just like, I just love musicals, and I grew up on them, and so I said, well, yeah, what is it? And so he sent me the book, which Brian York had been working on at that point, and the score. And I knew nothing about it. And I listened to it, and it struck a very personal chord for me, because my father went into the Harland and Wolff shipyards when he was 16, and in Belfast, and I grew up in a shipbuilding family, and so the very sort of metaphors and realities of the show were something that were deeply personal to me. So I did the unforgivable thing, which I called my agent, I called Joe, and I said, yes, I'm in, please. That's it.
And Michael, your connection to the shipbuilding industry?
Runs deep. Well, I have none. I have no connection to the shipbuilding industry, but that doesn't mean that I can't relate to the struggle and the conflict.
And your father, is he not a well-known acting teacher and coach? And so he's building artistic
ships. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Well, what I like about it is this is called The Last Ship, because it's the last ship they're going to build in an industry that's dying. But when this industry dies, it's not just a business dying, it's a whole town and ultimately a whole way of life that is going to be gone. And it's being preserved in some way in your music and in this story.
It's really a celebration of community and the importance of community and the importance of work and identity. And it's a joyous celebration of community, because that's what we need. When a community is under stress, under pressure, that's when great drama happens. It's also when people become their better selves, and I think we managed to do that in this play. But talking about a connection with ships, I think we're all boat people. all of us got here on a ship, our ancestors did. We recognize the shape of a ship. It has a symbolic resonance that all of us get. And when we launch our ship at the end, everybody is with us.
In your score, are you trying to evoke at all the sea in any way? I mean,
It's a combination of folk music, modal folk music, which is characteristic of where I come from, but also a tip of the hat to musical theatre. You know, listening to Richard Rodgers and stealing every idea he ever had and putting it in the score is something that I've done with pride.
And also, you're talking about pub culture and that kind of music and sound.
Well, I began my musical career in pubs, standing up and singing, having things thrown at me.
Yes, yes.
It's tough.
There's a lot of good drinking songs in The Last Ship.
There are.
well, I mean, but you look at these communities, these are people who are working very difficult jobs. And they don't have a lot of money, they don't have a lot of entertainment except the pub culture at the end of the day to drink and to sing and entertain themselves.
Right, and you know, when I talked to my father about what it was like to actually work on ships, you know, in the shipyards, he didn't romanticize it.
Yeah.
It was brutal hard work in terrible weather, whether in Newcastle or Belfast or Gdansk, and it's a hard life, you know, and it makes people hard in a certain way. So where they find their joy, where they find the elation in their lives, the pub culture, the sort of male bonding of rugby clubs and things was hugely important to them. Social dancing classes. Harlan and Wolff in Belfast used to sponsor social dancing classes. So the 50 to 100,000 workmen would leave at the bell, and many of them would go and do social dancing, which is where my father met my mother.
Stephen Hoggett's the choreographer, right, who's
Yeah.
really wonderful, did the Curious Incident of the Dog at the Nighttime, which we like. He has put a lot of this kind of folk dancing and social dancing into this piece as well.
He has, yeah. Yeah, he's extraordinary.
Are you a dancer, though, by training?
No.
I don't think of you.
No. I don't think of myself as a dancer.
But you
That's the
move
extraordinary-
beautifully.
Oh, thank you so much. But that's the extraordinary thing about working with Haggett is that his vocabulary seems to, he works so organically, and so it's easy to feel free as an actor to move expressively without having to think of yourself as a dancer per se or anything. You know, he can. It's incredible what he can sort of allow you to do.
Sting, I want to go back to something you said. You said you quite proudly have been influenced by Richard Rodgers. He seems to be, of all the great musical theater composers, Richard Rodgers is your favorite?
I would think if I had to name my top musical, I would say Carousel is my favorite. And yes, I learned augmented chords and diminished chords from Richard Rodgers, and I think that's the key to theatrical music.
Really? Can you explain that a little bit more to me, because I'm not musical.
Well, an augmented chord is an unstable chord that leads you on. And one of the things I've learned from my dramaturges here is that when you're writing songs for the theatre, you have to advance narrative. So something is constantly leading you on. And those kind of chords are always doing that. It's not quite finished. So where do we go next? So there's a kind of mystery to it. And I've thoroughly enjoyed learning that skill in this process. You know, you can't just express one emotion in a song. You have to advance the narrative.
One of the great sort of joys and discoveries for me, because this is my first musical, so it was all very uncharted waters for me, is how the book and the song have to function as a single unit. There can never be that line of demarcation of saying, okay, now I've done my job, Sting, now it's your job.
Right.
That if the scene doesn't lead in properly, or if the scene renders the song unnecessary, then we haven't done our jobs as collaborators.
Right. Well, Harvey Fierstein, who wrote the book to La Cage aux Folles, he always said his job was to write a great scene so that the composer could then steal it and turn it into a song.
Or vice versa.
Yeah. Oh, that happens too? You've written a song that suddenly becomes a...
We cross-tinker.
We do. We do.
That's a good
Did
way.
he give you Carousel? Because there's shades of Billy Bigelow's character, certainly, in the one that Michael's playing.
Absolutely. I mean, Billy Bigelow we talked about a lot, and we've talked about it a lot since Chicago, because the majority of our work had to do with Gideon's character.
Yes.
And we constantly went back to Carousel and referred to Billy Bigelow, the way that they were able to create a truly complicated, troubled man and make him emotionally accessible to the audience.
You love him.
You love him.
You love him, yeah.
Now, I was impressed hearing, Sting, that you were living with this show out of town, because Some of the other famous rock stars who come to Broadway, like Bono and The Edge, they never got around to Spider-Man until it was well into previews. But you decided, I'm going to live with the show, and I'm going to, the old-fashioned Richard Rodgers way, the only way to do it is to live in the hothouse of it.
Well, if that's true, and those individuals weren't involved at that stage, I think they missed a lot of fun.
Yes, they say Elton John was nowhere near.
Never, he's never.
I'm not going to say anything.
Okay.
But if that's true, I think they missed a great deal of fun and a great deal of learning. I mean, it's an extraordinary process, a collaborative process, a difficult process, the most difficult thing I've ever tackled.
Really?
And the most satisfying in many ways.
Did you have any trepidation since, you know,
course.
people like Bono and The Edge were shot down with Spider-Man? You know, you guys are targets, of course. You know, these big famous rock people coming to our little church.
I mean, I think it's, you know, it's we're the bull elephant that you're hitting with a shotgun. But that wouldn't put me off. You know, I've never wanted to fall off the lowest rung of any ladder I ever sort of start to climb. And I think, you know, why not? I'm here to take risks. Nothing of value is without risk. And I'm only risking my reputation.
That's a minor little detail like that. All right, well, the show is The Last Ship. What theater are we at there, Susan?
The Neil Simon
The
Theater.
Neil Simon, right. And your opening night is?
26th of
Tick-tock.
October.
Tick-tock. Well, listen, it's a terrific new musical, The Last Ship, with a book by John Logan, starring Michael Esper. I got it right, thank you. With a great new score by Sting. Good luck with The Last Ship, and thank you very much for being our guest tonight on
Thank you
Theater
both.
Thank you,
Thank you so much.
And now you have to go to rehearsal.
Talk. You're out.
Yeah.
Boom.
You're out.
Tick, tick, tick.
Going rude over here, starting to Twitter without telling my minders. But what if nobody hears me? Did it happen? I have a follower.
Oh, I'm sorry. I couldn't hear you over the sound of my awesome blonde hair.
Michael, Off-Broadway has a new hit. It's called
Yes, you've been raving about it.
Tail.
So is Charles Isherwood of the New York Times, I believe.
That's right, and many, many other critics. Tailspin, about 4 scandal-racked male politicians and the women who either love them, sleep with them, or interview them. We're joined by the playwright of Tailspin,
Oh, improv. Oh, talented.
I'm failing.
Improv. There you go.
I'm-
Great job, Susan. Improv. That Drew
Man.
Close stuff is working out for you.
We're leaving this in. We're joined by the playwright Mario Correa, who has
Hi.
put together the stories of Larry Craig, Mark Sanford, Mark Foley, and Anthony Weiner into quite an enjoyable evening. We are also joined by Anthony Weiner, Nate Smith. This is you've done many media, but this is your first play, right?
First play.
The first play. And
How come we couldn't get the real Anthony Weiner? He's not doing anything.
and this playing all the women in the show, a beloved television personality, Rachel Dratch. You know her from her, 8 years on Saturday Night Live?
7, yeah.
And 7 things, and many, many things since then. Rachel, congratulations to you all on this show. Now, I want to ask you, what inspired you to make this study using the real words
Right.
of these 4 guys?
Yeah, it's verbatim. It's based only on the transcripts, the police reports, the text.
You can't make it up.
all
I
that.
mean, you can't improve
make
on it,
up.
can you?
Yeah, no, that's what the inspiration really. I wanted to write a play because I used to be a Capitol Hill staffer for a number of years. And I knew Mark Foley, the congressman from Florida, who was one of the 4 scandalous guys in our play.
Did he hit on you when you were Paige?
He hit on someone I was dating at the time. But that you know, that was a very large company of folks who could claim that too. And I knew I wanted to write sort of a fictionalized account of a congressman who led 2 lives, basically. But when I dug into the transcripts of the Foley scandal for inspiration, I realized there's no way you can write this dialogue and have any audience believe it. And that's when I thought, okay, I'm just going to use the actual transcripts, the things that these guys actually said, and expanded it out to the other politicians that you mentioned.
And it's all public record, right? So you don't have to pay royalties.
Yeah, it's in the public record. I mean, you have to you do fall into some real internet wormholes when you find some of these things and some of these police recordings and transcripts, but it's all out there.
Now, you play Anthony Weiner, one of the most loathsome human beings on the planet.
Is he?
The opinions of Michael Riedel
I
are
was
not reflected in the opinions of the producer
I was at the Union Square Farmers Market this past summer,
he's there.
and he was there shopping. Now, surrounded by all of the left-wing liberals who live in Manhattan. as he walked, everybody just ran away from him. Nobody wanted to be near him. So how do you make him sympathetic? I mean, don't you actors have to identify with the person you play?
Yes. I mean, so much of what the play is just doing what's written, and you know what was going on in that moment, so it's not necessarily a sympathetic moment. But the gist of it is like, it's a very intimate, there's a lot of intimate.
You have him tweeting. You do this wonderful scene where you're tweeting and then giving speeches, and it's mind-boggling.
Yeah.
That to really be careful when you're online, people, right?
mean,
that kind of thing. Yeah.
That's the issue with the guy. He's got all this irrefutable evidence about all of it having happened. But I found that when we do the show, that people have a real sympathy for him, regardless. Yeah, people's response is sort of like, oh, we kind of miss Anthony Weiner, and it's nice to see him again. And in a way, I think it's true for all the four characters, the four politicians who kind of fell from grace. That the audiences all sort of find some sympathy for him. It's just sort of the nature of the play. It feels like, in one way or another, this guy's kind of had a rough go of it, and it feels like he's really been raked over the coals. That said, he did like.
Well, you played wives and the women in these guys' lives. Do you find sympathy for these losers?
Well, actually,
these
no.
creeps?
The way that the play turns out is there are moments where you feel for each of these guys. Like, so it's not just like it's that's in there too. But I'm always surprised, because I'm watching these guys do their speeches and stuff, and I'm always surprised, like, I feel kind of bad for this guy, and that's what the audience is like too. So we've got both sides of the coin.
Well, a lot of these women stood by their.
Well, yeah, that's what I like. I mean, some of the women are totally like whatever he says is right, and some of like
Jenny Sanford is the heroine.
I mean, everyone's kind of relieved to see her. She's the last one we present, and she's the one that's like, oh, I'm not standing up there. So everyone's like, there's this relief applause kind of when she says, no, I didn't want to stand up there.
Well, you were around these guys and their wives. I mean, what is it? Is it really the old Bill and Hillary Clinton thing that these teams are firm in a way and they rise to the top together, and maybe relationships are not what they once were when they got together, and now it's a business partnership?
I think there is a lot of that to it, really. I think a lot of them have basically sort of hitched their wagons to each other, and we see that in the Weiner scene with Huma Abedin and Weiner, because she obviously is a very accomplished woman. She has a bright future, seemingly, and yet why would she stand by him? So there are folks who do seem to be basically like hitching their own wagons to each other, and others, I think, just are in marriages where maybe cluelessness abounds. Like I think Rachel's Suzanne Craig is a very funny example of that. She just will not see anything but what she believes to be the truth, despite all the evidence, and Rachel plays it amazingly.
Yes, Mrs. Larry Craig, and you feel bad for her.
Well, remind us what happened to Larry Craig, Susan.
Well, he's the bathroom, wide stance man. Tapper. Yeah.
But what is his wife's attitude?
She just thinks, well, that's another thing. In terms of feeling bad for these guys, like, there is an element of, like, there's, like, a witch on here. Even if he was looking for gay sex in bathrooms, it's like, why is this a police issue? I don't know. There's some things, like, seems kind of strange that we devote all this time to catching. Aside from that, she just thinks it's all made up and that he is completely straight and not messing around on the side, which that's her.
You are struggling with feeling one thing, there's a level, and why don't they leave these people alone? But then there's the other level of the hypocrisy, which you're bringing in. The three, Weiner accepted, all criticized Clinton tremendously, and they all were family values guys. And that's where you're...
Yeah. And also, I think one of the things that comes through is that, all of us, or maybe most of us, make mistakes in our personal life. None of us are perfect. However, these guys felt like they could do really outrageous things and get away with them, not because of sex, but because of power. So the play really is about power, right? This belief that if I'm a rule maker, I'm a member of Congress, and I'm making the rules for others, I don't have to live by those rules. So quite apart from sexual foibles, which we see in all kinds of, manners of life, these guys were really, my power will protect me. And we see that in the Craig scene when Senator Craig literally presents a business card from the Senate identifying himself as a U.S. Senator to the cop, as if that's going to be enough to get him out of this sex sting. So that, I think, is a good example of that.
One other thing I've noticed with the play is, some nights people are laughing a lot, and we're like, this is a rollicking comedy. And the other nights it's quiet, and we're like, what's happening? And I talked to some friends, and they said, well, sometimes you're laughing, and sometimes you're just angry at these guys. Like, some people are taking it very seriously of this hypocrisy, and they don't feel like laughing because they're pissed at these
It's
politicians.
very true. And sometimes people are so on board with the story and so familiar with it that the lines that are the most ribald or, you know, like ridiculous get big laughs. And other nights, people are just straight up shocked that they didn't know the details of how, you know, frankly, dirty it gets.
Yeah,
it's pretty dirty.
Did you
dirty.
invite
Yeah.
Anthony Weiner to
dirty.
the opening night?
I'm sure we have. We'll ask our producers if they have.
You're
You know,
extending, so he's got plenty of time to see it.
Right. We were looking forward to having all the politicians come. I'd love to have Jenny Sanford in the audience. That's my dream, really.
She's probably the only one of those guys.
would go. But the Weiner that says that you go with him is that he still doesn't understand why people had a problem. Do you get that sense? I mean, I'm taking this from your words.
I think the issue that people have with Weiner is that he lied about it initially. And I mean, I remember my wife during the middle of the scandal just saying, just say you have a sex addiction. Just say you have a sex, you know, and if he had said that, then
Right.
she would have been so much more likely to forgive him and say like, well, yeah, I mean, that happens, happens. Excuse me, it is a ribald language.
Stuff
We're sending you the FCC file.
Anthony's hypocrisy was lying about it and saying that he didn't have an issue, you know, and he didn't do it even.
What I found shocking about Anthony Weiner, though, is after the whole first round of stuff, then when he's running for mayor, like, that's what shocked me. It's like, what, you're going to get involved in this again? Like, that's where it just turns.
Yeah.
Well, because
It's
that is
addiction.
that is the insanity of this man, that he cannot be out of the spotlight.
Yeah. Well,
You take away his podium and his microphone and his appearances on Rachel Maddow, and you've taken away his air.
we struggled with the Weiner scene, I think, more than others because we were trying to figure out what was the motivation of this couple to stay together and then to do this again. We really wanted to understand
They
it.
were modeling themselves on the Clintons.
And I think that's what we ultimately decided, and in fact, why we see Bill and Hillary. We see Hillary actually in the play a little bit, and Rachel does a great Hillary Clinton as well. In fact, her job is to do every
I
possible
really need
wronged
that wig,
woman.
though. That's one I would really like a wig.
And you played the
I like the Barbara Walters, who's just as
Well, that's my
disgust for
favorite
all
part.
of these people.
Rachel's Barbara Walters brings down the house every night.
Oh,
Now,
okay.
actually, folks even anticipate it. So we basically, the lights go down at one moment. We see a Barbara Walters tweet.
A hush fills the room.
Yes. People start clapping, and Rachel begins her Barbara Walters.
And I love the Brazilian mistress.
Oh, yeah.
That's you too.
Yes.
You worked for Democrats, right?
I worked for Republicans and Democrats, actually. So I
you
worked
did?
for a Republican Congresswoman, and I worked for Senator Bob Kerry's presidential campaign. Senator Bob Kerry, who came to our performance about a week ago, and actually at the end took photos with these guys and showed them how to do the political pointing. It was very funny.
Oh, well, really?
that
Give
kind
us the Bob Kerry political
Hey,
point.
how are you? Nice to see you. How you doing? It was a lot of that. He was so cool. That was such a cool thing
was
of him.
cool.
That's superficial. That hey,
He
Oh,
thanked me
you
for
put a lot of gravitas behind it.
and he thanked me for keeping him out of the play, and I told him, you kept yourself out of the play.
Weiner aside, because he was just so crazy outrageous. Do you think, though, on the whole, the media has more fun going after the Republicans, the conservatives, than they do the liberals?
You know, I think it depends. I mean, I think one of the reasons why these Republicans that we have in our play were sort of prime targets was because they were fairly moralistic. You know, they were out there, for example, Senator Larry Craig introducing the federal marriage amendment. You know, that marriage would be only between a man and a woman, and then, of course, getting caught trying to solicit sex from a man in a bathroom. So,
And what was Foley on the head of what committee?
a caucus for missing and exploited children. So they really sort of like put themselves out there. But there are plenty of Democrats too, you know, like McGreevey, John Edwards, all these guys.
Bill Clinton.
Yeah, well, and you know, it's so funny because picking among these, there was no dearth of material. You know, literally, I sat with all the scandals, I was figuring out, like, which are the funniest, which ones have sort of a story that is bigger than themselves. You know, it's not just about a bathroom, but says something about a generation of men or about power or about their women.
Have you seen this book that's just out? I think it's by Matt Bai from the New York Times about the Gary Hart,
Yeah.
Donna Rice monkey business
Right.
scandal, in which he argues in the book that it was that scandal that changed everything, and that now politicians' lives are going to be, private lives are going to be fair game for the press.
Yeah.
And there's going to be a whole group of the press that is going to spend nothing but their time looking to take somebody down like that.
Right.
Do you agree with that thesis?
I mean, I think it was sort of the first that opened that door. And then the Clinton scandal, I think, with Lewinsky was the one that sort of brought the entire nation into this involvement. And all these politicians that we cover in Tailspin were sort of born of that, right? They were all in office when all those scandals happened. So they were very much sort of raised in it. And that's why you see them sort of making these same mistakes, I think, that we're all sort of like spinning in unison in a way.
Well, recently it came out that Warren G. Harding had a mistress and was writing salacious letters. I was thinking,
Yeah, I saw.
we should include that.
Yes, you should. Although I want to plug the funniest novel by our friend Robert Plunkett, who wrote a novel 20 years ago about Warren G. Harding's
really?
mistress's letters, and it's a not to be missed funny novel.
Wow.
Okay.
My love affair with Warren G. Harding.
My search for Warren Harding.
Would
All right.
happily play Warren G.
Yeah.
But they didn't have the. We have to go. But they didn't have the 20. Warren G. Harding didn't have to put up with the 24-hour news cycle.
That's true.
Or tweeting.
He wasn't
or-
so good
yeah.
on Twitter, Warren Harding. Yeah.
Pitch along for Richard and Pat Nixon. That was a real proper marriage.
No, the proper
They
marriage
loved
was
each other.
Bess and Harry Truman, the gold standard.
Well, this is how much Richard Nixon loved Pat Nixon. He would take her to dates with other people when they were in college together.
With
He
other
would drive her to her dates with other people, and then he would pick her up after and drive her home. That's how devoted
devotion.
Man was.
That guy
Okay,
kept his
and-
nose clean, no scandals.
No, no. All right. Well,
that
thank
note.
you very much.
That was good.
Tail, exclamation point, spin, exclamation point, at the Lynn Redgrave Theater on Bleecker Street, written by Mario Correa, starring Rachel Dratch and Nate Smith, and 3 other terrific actors, Arnie Burton.
Arnie Burton,
Sean
Sean Dugan, and
Tom
Tom
Gallant.
Gallant.
Wonderful company. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Our thanks to the Friends of Theater Talk for their significant contribution to this production. Theater Talk is made possible in part by the Frederick Lowe Foundation, the Corey and Bob Dinelli Charitable Fund, the Noel Coward Foundation, Carrie J. Fries, the Dorothy Strelson Foundation, plus public funds from the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs, the New York State Council on the Arts, a state agency, and the Theater Development Fund's Technical Accessibility Program, which helps provide closed captioning.
We welcome your questions or comments for Theater Talk. Thank you and good night.